Hello, everybody. So here we come to this assignment, the research paper, which is the assignment that I find over and over again the majority of students struggle with the most. And, for anybody that doesn't like writing or doesn't like research or doesn't like both, it can be really tough. So I've developed this video as not only instructions to let you know what to do, but also as a way to help you avoid common pitfalls that result in people, failing the assignment. So please watch and pay close attention and let me know if you have any questions. All right, so what the academic research paper is, number one, it is not an opinion or a counter opinion paper. So in the past, I've had a lot of times students, they write the opinion paper and they think that a research paper is the same thing but with sources, and it's not that at all. A lot of times students note that you have to argue against yourself, and so what I end up with is just a counter opinion paper where they have sources, but it's no more academically rigorous or no more research than the opinion paper was. So number one, it's not an opinion or counter opinion paper. Number two, it does argue against the opinions that you expressed in your opinion paper. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that in my opinion paper, I argued that immigration is bad in the United States. I don't like it. Immigrants get on my nerves. They can't speak English. They take our jobs. They bring down our property values. They increase crime. Yada 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 yada. Whatever my opinions on the matter might be. So now, in my academic research paper, what I have to do is I have to act like I am publishing something or writing something or researching something that's going to specifically prove my opinions wrong. But now, you'll notice in the opinions that I gave, I backed it up with nothing. That's just my opinion. In academic research, we take our opinions and our beliefs and our bias and we try to set all those aside, and we argue from a position of objectivity, of data-driven analysis. And so for my research paper, what I would need to do is I would need to counter those aspects from my opinion with something real. So if I had said in my opinion paper, that immigrants bring crime, now what I need to do is research crime rates among native-born and immigrant populations in the United States and see if there is a statistically significant difference between those two and which one's lower. And I can tell you from research I've done that immigrants have lower crime rates than native-born. So therefore, if I can put that in my academic research paper, I then prove that aspect of my opinion wrong. Let's say that I also put that immigrants don't speak English. And I look at statistics as to which language is spoken in the US and why. In my research, I find that there is no official language of the United States, and therefore no one should be required to speak English because nothing requires it. That there is no requirement to speak English. I also find that there are plenty of native-born people who don't speak English, and that the overwhelming majority of immigrants do speak English. And so I use those arguments to prove my opinion wrong. And we just do that one by one down our opinions. We figure out the real research and we argue against ourselves. Now maybe I find that one of my opinions, I can't find a way to prove it wrong. That's okay. I just publish what I have. Let's say that I find that in my opinion, I say that most immigrants are from Mexico and Mexicans are taking over the country. I can publish in my academic research paper that the overwhelming majority of immigrants are from Mexico, if that's what I find. But what I have to counter is the idea that, quote unquote, they're taking over our country, because that is a subjective assessment. That has framed as in like an invasion, right? And so what I would instead say is, immigrants from Mexico are coming in at this rate, and they are locating themselves here predominantly, and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to give actual facts and real analysis rather than just what I think, what I believe, what I saw in the news, what my grandpa says, what my uncle says, what my neighbor says, right? None of those things matter. All that matters is what we can actually argue and sort of, for lack of a better word, prove. Okay? Number three, does it follow proper grammar? Are there no run-on sentences, no sentence fragments? Do I write in full paragraphs, but not, one long thing that takes up 4 pages or 1 page even? Do I have a thesis statement at the beginning of my research paper that tells what I'm going to argue in this paper? And is that thesis statement one that is objective, right? Is my thesis statement something like immigration in the United States is a major contested point, but overall analysis finds that immigration is beneficial to the United States? Okay, that's a nice thesis statement. I can argue that. I can take it down level and tell why. If I say a thesis statement like immigrants are good for America, I can't argue that because good is subjective and there's no way for me to argue what's good or bad because what somebody thinks is good, somebody else might think is bad. So stay away from those kinds of things and give me a good, strong academic research thesis. Continuing. Part 2. Any format style is fine. I'm not picky. You can use APA, MLA, Harvard, Chicago, whatever you want, but it does need a format style. Not only in the writing section, is there going to be a title page? Is there going to be page numbering? Do you have headers? All of those things, your format style will tell you. Typically, in political science, we tend to use either the APA or the Harvard style, but as I said, whatever style you're comfortable with is fine. That will also apply to our works cited page. Do you call it a works cited page? Do you call it a reference page? Is it an annotated bibliography page? Like whatever you're going to need, and the way that you format it need to be aligned with your style. A list of URLs will not suffice. You need to have some in-text citations in your paper somewhere, whether that's footnote, endnote style, or author date in text. You have to have something. That's cornerstone of research paper is where did we get our research and who are we crediting? If you have trouble with that, let me know. Number 2, it needs to be 4 to 6 pages of actual paper. This does not include a title page or works cited page. Your content. That's a very short research paper. I'm going to say that individuals who write the 4-page, the minimum, are going to get sort of a minimum grade, and individuals who write the 6-page are going to get sort of a maximum grade. So be aware of when you're writing, are you filling your content with legitimate, arguments, details, right? So basically, your whole paper is a big argument, and it needs to be filled with things that support that argument. And then number 3, you're going to choose one of the topics listed on the assignment page, but it's going to be the same one from your opinion paper. And I'm sorry I misspelled paper, but you know what it is, opinion paper. And now what you're going to do is you're going to argue against yourself. Like you're going to assume that your beliefs that you wrote in your opinion paper are your crazy uncle, and now it's your job as the educated, learned academic to prove your crazy uncle wrong. All right, the how-to process. It's very difficult to write from an objective standpoint, especially if these are topics we're passionate about. If it's things like civil rights or police brutality or immigration or abortion or gun rights. These are things that get a lot of people really hyped up. And so your job, step 1, is to remove yourself. You, as the author, do not matter. If you own a gun, great. If you don't, great. It has no effect on your paper on gun control or gun rights, whatever way you're going to write it. Take yourself out. No anecdotal, no, well, I've owned a gun my whole life and I've never killed anybody, therefore guns are safe. No, we can't do any of that. You are a reporter. You are an analyst. You are a scientist. If I were to be in a lab with a white lab coat and run an analysis, nobody's going to care whether or not I have blonde hair or blue eyes, or how I feel about the temperature in the lab. All that matters is that petri dish and what happened to it when I added this or that enzyme. Same thing here. Nothing about you matters, only your analysis, your research, and the argument you're making. Speaking of argument, number 2, you need to argue like a lawyer, not a toddler, right? None of this like, well, I think this, well, you think that, well, let's agree to disagree. Nope, 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 nope. That's toddler level. You're arguing like a lawyer. You're presenting evidence, you're arguing your case, you are being logical, you are being reasonable, you are being dispassionate, and you are arguing from a place of legal framework. If you want to tell me that, if you want to argue something pro-choice, for example, and you want to say that that there's support for pro-choice in our governmental framework, you can't throw off things like, well, abortion's a human right. Because if you go to the list of human rights, and there is one, a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, abortion is not on that list. So if you were in a courtroom and you said that abortion was a human right, and the judge called you on that and said, no, it's not, now you look like an inept lawyer. So you have to make sure that whatever you're arguing is based on something real, not on your beliefs. And if you think abortion should be a human right, go back to step 1 and remove yourself, because it's not. All right, number 3, support those arguments with real data from reliable sources. That one can get tricky. You need to be using good sources. You need to be using things that you find from your library or from Google Scholar, peer-reviewed articles. If you're going to use news, make sure it's a reliable news source. You can check the media bias chart. Or if you have to use sources that have bias, then call them out in your paper, right? I checked out, Breitbart News, which scored a -5 on reliability on a 0 to 5 reliability score, and found that it reported blah, 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 blah. Thus, this is an unreliable finding from an unreliable source. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's fine if you have to report it, and I've done research on things that are not reliable, but what we have to do is we have to sort of shine a flashlight or a highlighter on the parts that are unreliable, and then we have to replace it with something that is. So it can get pretty tricky. Again, let me know if you need some help. All right, so here I have an example thesis for you. So your thesis is going to be your main argument. I'm going to use assisted suicide because that's not something we cover in this class, and you will not be writing about it. Again, you will not choose assisted suicide, so this does not apply to you and you can't use it. But an example would be, assisted suicide violates the basic tenets of the protection of life as guaranteed by the Constitution. That's my thesis. You can tell from my thesis that I'm arguing against assisted suicide, but I'm not saying anything about it being, bad or anything like that. I might go on to cite a right to privacy that the Supreme Court established, because there was nothing stronger to go on, right? I might use the fact that the federal government does not view execution as cruel or unusual punishment. I could talk about the Hippocratic Oath, and yeah, so there's lots of different ways that I can argue this from like a science perspective, from a rights perspective, from an ethics perspective, as long as I'm not part of it. Whether I agree or disagree with it doesn't really matter. Watch out for things like strawman arguments, appealing to passion, using religion, right? So what happens a lot of times is students think that they've come up with a really novel idea, and then they don't really think it through. For example, I have so many times read papers on abortion, and one of the arguments that those arguing a pro-choice side tend to make is they say, well, if you make abortion illegal, you're not going to stop it. All you're going to do is you're going to stop legal abortions, because women will still get abortions illegally. Okay, that's true. But if you continue with that argument and apply it to all other aspects, then nothing should ever be made illegal if people are still going to do it anyway. So why should we make murder illegal? People still murder anyway. People will murder illegally even if you make murder illegal. So why should we make it illegal? That's a straw man argument. It's when you build something up And from one perspective, it looks real and it sounds plausible. But then when you look at it from another example, it's like, wait, or another angle, it's like, wait, this doesn't even begin to make sense. So be careful with that. So here, my example thesis, a poor one would be assisted suicide is wrong as a violation of our humanity and should be illegal. Three major issues there. Wrong is subjective. We never use things such as wrong because it's each person has a different definition of right and wrong. Number two, a violation of our humanity. What even does that mean? What is humanity? No, there's no consensus on that. And should. Never ever use the word should. Should is a judgment word. So we're going to throw out this that second thesis as totally unusable. All right, speaking of the things that we should throw out, here's a list of don'ts that you want to make sure you avoid in your paper. Using should, that's judgy. We, you, or any of those like, inclusive, subjective things that make it unclear whether the author is like talking directly to somebody or including somebody. Good, bad, those can't be used. None of that. Number two, we can't argue from a place that is not universal. I used this before, but if you say, well, God says blah, 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 not everyone shares the same religious beliefs. So we can't use that because we have to come from a place of generalizability, universality. You might make a claim that, all of the world's religions teach this, or the majority of the world's religions teach this, and then I would put in parentheses something like, which accounts for, 75% of the world's population. That way we have a consensus. We say, okay, well, pluralistically, 3/4 of the world shares this sentiment. That might be generalizable, but you have to be careful with the way you frame it. Number three, you cannot rely on poor sources of biased info. News, blogs, info pages written by nobody important, sources without vetting. It's very common for people, I have found for students, they write a research paper and what they do is they go and they Google things and then they use the things that they Googled as sources. And that's just not sources. Like, it's not verified, legitimate sources. If I were to Google right now, when did slavery end? Google will provide me the date of the Emancipation Proclamation in the United States, and there will be several articles about it and the end of slavery. But I know as a researcher that slavery has not ended and that there are 40 million slaves in the world today. So I can't rely on Google. But if I go to Google Scholar and I do a research on slavery and countries where slavery is still legal and all that, then I can get good peer-reviewed academic sources that do the same research that I do and look at what it actually means to be a slave, what's the definition, which countries have state-sponsored slavery, which ones don't, etc., etc. Much better than Jimmy's blog on why slavery is bad. This is just a warning. Remember, if the topic you pick is one you're passionately on one side of, then maybe you need to argue the other side for a change so you don't lose yourself in your passions. Very common in political science. You're going to have to find a way, well, social sciences in general, to remove yourself. So if you, at the very core fiber of your being, believe in pro-life, that every life is precious from the moment of conception and there's no other side to it, then maybe you do need to write a paper from a research perspective on pro-choice so that, you can understand at least the arguments from the other side and the perspectives that could be taken and the arguments that could be made that would prove you wrong. Now, I want everyone to take a minute and think about that, which means no matter which side you're on, you can always prove yourself wrong, which means that in political science, we understand that even though there may not be a right solution or a right perspective, there can be multiple wrong ones. Nobody gets it right 100%. Everybody gets it wrong, some percent. So in academics, we have to be dispassionate. You will require dispassion to write this paper. And I believe that you can do it. Again, let me know if you need it. All right, here's your rubric. I've kept it pretty um, like open, but basically 1/4 of your grade is going to come from grammar and writing. So that's going to be, are you using those topic sentences? Do you have paragraphs? Is your spelling good? Um, are you capitalizing? Um, is your paper spaced correctly? Are you using like standard fonts and standard sizes, all that kind of stuff? 25% is going to be, is your content pertinent and compelling? That's going to be your argument, right? So if you tell me that you are in this paper kind of, basically that you're arguing for gun rights, then that means that everything you say has to be compelling enough that when I finish reading it, you're never going to tell me in your paper that you're arguing for gun rights. But at the end of your paper, when I've finished reading all of your arguments that were both pertinent and compelling, then I need to scratch my head and think, never really thought about gun rights that way before. Uh, yeah, I definitely can understand this perspective, or I'm definitely feeling these arguments, that they are legitimate. So always assume that I'm against you and that you're having to convince me. So convince me well. And the 25% is going to be keeping bias and opinion in check. It's really hard to do for some people, easier for others. But remember, your paper needs to be written from an objective standpoint. So keep all of your judgments to the side. No should, no we, no must, no nothing like that. No rights, no wrongs. Nope. Remove yourself. And then 25% is going to come from your resources. Is your works cited page well resourced? Is it thorough? Is it done correctly, formatted correctly? Are you citing throughout your paper? And as a general rule, you cite anything that isn't common knowledge. So if I were to tell you in my paper that Abraham Lincoln was one of the presidents of the United States, I don't need to cite that because everybody knows that. But if I were to tell you that from, the beginning of his first term through his reelection, he signed 800 executive orders, and 3 of them had to do with freeing slaves. Then I would need to cite that because most people don't know that, so I need to cite it. And as another rule is cite things, cite everything, but only quote what you have to quote. You need to paraphrase everything else. The only reason you should quote is if there's no possible way that you can say it the same or better than the author said it. So don't fill your paper with quotes. That will count off as well. All right, I know this is long, but I'm trying to help prepare you for the future. You'll be writing academic papers, likely the rest of your life, depending on the field you get into. And so in the social sciences, it's a precarious spot because a lot of times students come into the field already having beliefs about every topic we've covered. If I say things like immigration, abortion, climate change, vaccinations, gun control, right? You already have an idea. Like right now, if I were to say, what's your stance on vaccinations? You can tell me, even if you've done zero research. It's just a fact. We are socialized with answers from a young age. Parents, peers, school, TV, wherever we get our perspective on life, our ideology, our worldview, and then we fill in the holes with educated guesses based on our beliefs. And the more that we believe them, the more that they're perpetuated, the more that we believe them, it's very difficult to unlearn things that we believe are true. And that's what we're trying to do here in this class. I need you to challenge the things that you believe are true that maybe have no backing. And you're going to have to do that in this paper too. If you believe to your core that, there should be gun laws, to protect children in schools from gun violence, and you champion it, and you donate money, and you march, and all that, and then I ask you to write a paper on gun rights, you have to do that. The only way to survive in the social sciences is to understand the arguments from both sides, if for no other purpose than to be able to dig in their arguments and find the issues. Remember that most students misuse both the words research and theory. Research is a study conducted with legitimate sources in a scientific manner. Likely, no one in this class has ever done any research. Research includes, having an experimental group and a control group, or doing a systematic comparison, or a pre and post test, or a deep case study analysis, or a meta-analysis. Likely no student in this class has ever done actual research. If you say that you've done research, I'm going to assume that that means that you Googled it, because that's what most people do, and that's what most people consider research. And then a theory is an established belief based on evidence and research. So a theory would be things like that germs exist, that there's gravity, that time is relative. These are all theories because they can't technically be proven, but there's enough data that has supported them over a long enough period that we generally believe them to be true. So I have an example here. Googling, did Brian Kemp steal the election in Georgia, will give you information, but it isn't research. Likewise, you likely already have a hypothesis, which is a question you seek to answer, not a theory. A hypothesis is what you believe to be true, which most people now call theory. So a hypothesis might be, I bet Australia's gun control measures have really decreased their mass shootings. While a theory is, I believe that time and space are not absolute and that gravity has an effect on both. So just be aware, not only in this class, but in the general public, when you say things like, well, I did my own research. Well, probably not. Probably you did an investigation. You read some information. Or you say, well, I have a theory that, no, you don't have a theory. You have a hypothesis. So just some quick education on that. All right, some final notes. I know this is long, but it's in lieu of a class. So I hope that everybody is still watching and learning. All right, sources matter. That's very important. Finding the right sources and vetting them for credibility is very important. Otherwise, you'll write a paper supporting things with what you consider to be, facts or statistics or whatnot, from sources that maybe they make them up. So you have to make sure you have good sources. Otherwise, it's going to ruin your paper. It's like building a house on quicksand, right? You have to build a house on something stronger. Probably most of you know this, but if you Google something, Google has tracking and algorithms that keep up with what you do. So for example, if you're a pro-choice enthusiast and you visit and you donate to pro-choice organizations and websites, Google knows that you're pro-choice. Therefore, if you Google something like, can fetuses feel being aborted, you're going to get pro-choice websites and pro-choice answers to that, because Google is giving you what you want to know. It's giving you what you want to hear, which is, scary for different reasons, but it also means that you're not getting neutral. You're getting bias, even from a search engine. Also, remember, all sources are biased one way or another. If you're looking for information that's something that's newsworthy, make sure you're checking out good news sources that reach at least the mixed reliability. That's the middle area on the media chart, which is attached to this assignment. But most reliable is preferred, which means you can't go down to the bottom right and do TV Fox News, and you can't go down to the bottom left and do the Palmer Report. You have to look at the things at the top, things like, NPR or Rutgers, right? These are reputable places to get news. And one last thing before I let you go, when you write, remember to write well. You have to capitalize proper nouns, and at the beginning of sentences, use periods, use paragraphs, look for topic sentences and supporting details in each paragraph. Remember, this is school, this is academics, it's not social media, and the way you deliver your content matters. Stay away from word vomit, stay away from rants, and use your words craftily to make your points. Argue like a lawyer, win your case. So I'll leave you there. If you need any help, let me know. That's what I'm here for. And I look forward to reading your papers.